You've probably heard something about the National Association of Realtors and a proposed settlement they've presented in response to a pretty large lawsuit. Well, what's the real deal? The litigation we are hearing about in the news was around the multiple listing services cooperative compensation model rule that was introduced in the 1990s in response to some calls from consumer protection advocates for buyer representation. Now, the way real estate used to work was that a seller listed their home with an agent. Okay, sounds standard. Then a cooperating agent would bring a buyer to a listing. Okay, still sounds like what we have now. However, this cooperating agent was technically a subagent for the listing broker. Huh? What's that? A subagent is a real estate license holder who represents a seller through cooperation with and consent of the broker representing the seller and is not sponsored by or associated with the seller's broker. So, a subagent is another real estate agent who works for a different real estate company but brings a buyer to see a listing? Yes. But that subagent doesn't represent the buyer? No, they don't. They actually represent the seller, but they show the buyer the property, right? Yes. Well, that's strange. If someone shows me a house, I'm just going to assume that that person is representing me. Exactly. And that was a big problem for the industry on a national scale. The FTC got involved and performed a study where they found that 71% of buyers surveyed thought the sub agent showing them a property was actually their agent. So then the industry goes through a transition to have formal buyer's agents. Some more time passed. Then the National Association of Realtors created a rule that stated in filing property with the multiple listing service, participants make blanket unilateral offers of compensation to the other MLS participants and shall therefore specify on each listing filed with the service the compensation being offered by the listing broker to the other MLS participants. This is necessary because cooperating participants have the right to know what their compensation will be prior to commencing their efforts to sell. Now, this phrasing and practice is what the plaintiffs in this case contended was anti-competitive. The proposed settlement, which most people agree will likely be approved by the court, affirms that cooperative compensation remains a choice for consumers when buying or selling a home, as it always has been. But it's going to look a little different now. The National Association of Realtors agreed to issue a new MLS rule prohibiting offers of broker compensation to be publicized openly on the MLS. However, they will continue to be an option for consumers to pursue outside of the context of the MLS through negotiation and consultation with real estate professionals. You know, real estate is the only profession I can think of where pay is not commensurate with experience and acumen. When compensation has been a blanket value provided on the MLS, the amount paid is the same regardless if the client is a new agent's learning experience or if the client is reaping the rewards of a seasoned agent's breadth of experience. And this point leads to another less talked about element of this proposed settlement, which is that MLS participants working with buyers will now be required to enter into written agreements with their buyers. All in all, these changes are about transparency and ensuring that buyers are in full control of what buyer agents are getting paid and sellers are in full control of what they're paying. But what we're seeing is that click-driven news sites and ratings-driven networks have irresponsibly framed the conversation in such a way that insinuates that this concept of cooperative compensation is in question. It's not. It's a practice that has worked well. What's changing is just how it's advertised. At the end of the day, 89% of home buyers worked with a real estate agent when purchasing their home last year. And most buyers will still probably want professional representation when going through what is typically the largest financial transaction of their lifetime, just like they would hire a professional for any other number of services which they don't normally work in. As has always been the case, if a seller chooses not to pay a cooperative compensation to the buyer's agent, he or she has that option. Nobody in this life works for free, so it is logical to assume that the buyer will be on the hook. But isn't the buyer always on the hook? Largely in the past, agent fees have come out of the seller's proceeds at closing, and there's this perception that sellers are stuck with the bill for agent compensation. But it's really the buyer who pays in the end and rolls that expense into the mortgage. Allow me to explain. Have you noticed how when the price of gas goes up, the price of goods go up, or that food prices get higher, so menu prices get higher? That happens because ultimately the buyer pays for any increase in the cost of goods sold. So while there is this perception that sellers are footing the bill for agent compensation, it's really the buyer who pays in the end, in the form of the sales price that has been adjusted to accommodate for the expenses related to the sale. And it's a collective approach. Your neighbor did it, so you're going to do it too. The grocery store across the street raises the price of eggs, and the other grocery store on the other side of the street sees buyers are still buying those eggs at the higher price. So they now increase the price of their eggs, even though their cost for those eggs never changed. It is unlikely that a seller will now list below the market because their cost of goods sold has decreased. Most sellers will continue to price with the market. And if sellers didn't price with the market, then people who bought their house pre-2020 would list their homes with maybe moderate price gains as opposed to taking advantage of the massive price appreciation homes have seen over the last 4 years. This is a counter to another fallacy purported by the media, and that's that this settlement will reduce home prices. I already touched on that a bit, but here's another way of looking at things. The value of real estate is shaped by the balance between supply and demand. The costs associated with a real estate deal encompass more than just agent fees. They include a variety of other related fees. If the commissions on real estate were to be lowered by 1%, for instance, based on this theory, then the price of a home valued at $500,000 would then drop to $495,000. Okay. Then I now have a question for you sellers out there. Do you now perceive your property as less valuable based on this settlement and will readily pass the savings on to the buyer? Well, not likely. What's more likely is that you will price your home in line with the market. The diminishing affordability of home ownership is primarily due to the significant appreciation in property values in our market over recent years. Also, consider this. When the fee for a cooperating agent's compensation is paid from the seller's proceeds at closing, it creates an economic incentive for the buyer to have representation. Take that away and make the buyer pay for this in the form of more cash to pay at closing. Well, you now create an economic incentive to have them not have representation. And this might have some unintended consequences, such as number one, a greater number of conditional offers on your home. Buyers might include a condition in their offer that obligates the seller to bear this expense, or they might ask for different benefits in return. Number two, fewer showings on your home. If a buyer wants to have representation and tells their agent they do not want to consider homes that would require them as the buyer to pay extra cash at closing to compensate their agent, then that authorizes the agent to not show your home. And for some buyers, this is not a choice. More on that in number 4. But number 3, increased liability to you as a seller. Doing business with a buyer that does not have representation opens up the door to new legal challenges and potential litigation down the road. Depending on the complexity of a transaction and the addenda required, there can be over 30 ways a buyer can get out of a contract without defaulting. If a buyer feels like they weren't given all the information or made aware of their option, or maybe feels taken advantage of because of their lack of representation, it could get litigious. And because of that, I can actually see listing agents increasing their listing fees if there is an unrepresented buyer on the other side of the deal. Listing agents will take on additional liability, even though they don't represent the buyer. And where there is additional liability, compensation should follow. Number 4, automatically losing out on FHA and VA home buyers who are not allowed to pay commissions under the terms of the loan. That's a lot of buyers you do not want to exclude. And at the recording of this video, buyers using government-backed loans are prohibited from paying agent commissions. So now, what do we do with all of this information? What does this change for sellers? Well, if you're working with a professional agent, probably not much. The fundamentals of selling a home have not changed. As a listing agent, my goal is to give you the maximum exposure to your property. It's why I offer my seller clients such a robust marketing platform. With 89% of buyers opting to have representation, offering compensation to the buyer's agent is just another way to increase your exposure and mitigate your risk. Now, what does this change for buyers? Well, if you are working with a professional agent, probably not much. If you don't have a written agreement with your agent already in place, you will likely be getting one sent to you very soon. While these rules wouldn't take effect until the summer, many brokerages are being proactive and enacting these proposals effective immediately. And now for my final thoughts. For years, there have been various levels of representation buyers and sellers could obtain. You can go the flat fee route. You can go the avoid the market altogether and sell directly to an internet buyer route, which, by the way, if you are considering doing that, check out my video. And towards the end, I will show you an actual example of a client who received an offer from one of these iBuyers, but ultimately sold their home on the open market and made $65,000 more than they would have if they had sold directly. There are commission rebate brokerages. There are full service brokerages. This is the beauty of our highly competitive industry. Consumers have so many choices of brokerages and agents and a menu of commission models. They can even try to do it by themselves. Not one model has made another model extinct, and I don't think that's going to start now. And if you're looking for a guide or for someone to help you with the process, or if you think you might have any real estate needs in 2024, we can help. Simply reach out by phone or text to 214-803-4444 or start with an email to me at jshannon@kw.com. I'm Jennifer Shannon. I'm a realtor and broker associate with the Crest Edge Group at Keller Williams. If you found this video helpful, remember to give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more real estate tips, and hit that notification bell to stay updated. Well, that's all for now. I will see you in the next video. Bye.